You ever feel like you're on a seesaw? I mean, you go up, things are good, you're happy, and then right back down, and you're miserable and not sure what's going on. I don't know about you, but to me, this quarantine has felt a lot like that. That there have been moments where I'm like, I think I might actually like this. I have more free time, I can spend time with my family, I have time to pursue hobbies that I don't normally get to do, and then the next day, or sometimes the next hour or even minute, I come crashing back down and I'm like, I hate everything. I think I hate all of this. I miss my friends. I miss going to church and seeing people. I miss life. I just want this to be over. And we just want to get off the seesaw. Let's end the up and down, right? Like, can we just have some peace from this ride? I don't know about you, but that's kind of quarantine thought number 2 today is based on that there are moments where we feel like this is actually pretty great. And then there are moments where we're like, this is terrible. I hate everything. And there's this up and down. And it makes me think that, a lot of times our relationship with God can feel the same way. If we're honest with ourselves, the way that we worship God can be like that same seesaw, that same up and down, that same, I like this, things are going great. I hate this, everything's miserable. And what causes that seesaw, most of all, I think, is our worship. Now, I don't mean when we sing songs, worthy of every song we could ever sing, right? That's a form of worship. There are all kinds of great songs on Spotify you can find. If you come to Covenant Students, we have playlists for you. Be happy to send those to you. That is a great form of worship, but that's not what I'm talking about. I don't just mean singing songs. I mean our worship, meaning how we live our lives. Because really, the Bible tells us in Romans chapter 12, verses 1 and 2, that our worship, this is Drew's paraphrase, our worship is a lifestyle. It's giving God our whole lives, our thoughts, our actions, our gifts, our talents, all of it. And when we give him those things, that's worship. But here's the struggle. Sometimes we end up worshiping other things. I don't mean in a weird way, like you close your eyes and pray over your Xbox controller, or you chant something when you receive dinner because you're worshiping the food that is before you. No, I mean more like, for me, when was the last time I put my phone down and actually left it on the other side of the room? Anytime I have a free minute, I'm on it. And if I'm not careful, that can become worship, where I'm putting every thought, energy, effort into that phone rather than into my relationship with God or engaging in relationships with those around me, my family. And so there's a guy in the Bible that I think really shows us something important. A guy named Gideon. He's one of my favorite characters in all the Bible. I think it's because it's very relatable, his story. God comes to him, and Gideon is actually hiding from some bad guys who have taken over the nation of Israel at this point, the Midianites. And Gideon is in this wine cellar hiding from everybody else. And God shows up to him and he says, greetings. I don't know if he said greetings. I think it's that in the Bible. You have to go look. Judges chapter 6. You figure out what God says, how God says hello, but an angel of the Lord appears and says greetings or welcome or shalom or whatever he says. He says, mighty man of valor is what he calls Gideon. Now, I just told you Gideon was hiding. Was that mighty? No. And so then it's like, well, God, are you making fun of this guy? Poor guy. Like, God, why are you picking on him? Well, here's what I think. God wasn't picking on Gideon. He wasn't making fun of him. He was calling Gideon to something greater than Gideon realized was even within him. And here's what I mean. God was going to use Gideon to do mighty things because he's a good God who called Gideon to do that, and he gave him the strength to do it greater than Gideon himself thought he could do. And the rest of that story is Judges chapter 6 through Judges chapter 8. It's a great story. I'd love to tell you the whole thing, but some of you have already clicked off this video, and if I told you the whole thing, many more of you would. So don't do that. Let me just tell you this. Go back and read it. It's good. But understand that this is a story of God's faithfulness to using somebody who was kind of unwilling most steps of the way. He was very scared. And God, we know this because God even asked him like, hey, if you're scared, do this. And the very next verse says, so Gideon did that thing that shows that he was scared. But what you need to understand about this story, I'll hit the highlights, is that God used Gideon and an army of only 300 people to defeat thousands and thousands of Midianites. What an awesome hero, right? What a mighty guy. But here's the trick. Gideon wasn't mighty really on his own. He was scared. God, the Almighty, was mighty through Gideon. And Gideon reached a point where he was obedient to what God asked him to do. And so he got to see God do mighty things in and through his life because he was willing to say yes to God. Isn't that so relatable to us? We get to see God do incredible things when we say yes to him. But at the very end of his story, there's another moment where we see Gideon fails. Because Gideon is asked by the people of Israel to rule over them. They're like, hey man, we just saw what you did. Rule over us. We trust you. Lead us. Keep winning victories for us, because they saw what God did through him. And Gideon started off really strong. He says, no, I'm not going to do that. God is going to rule over you. I won't rule over you. My sons won't rule over you. I appreciate you asking me, but no, I'm not going to do it. Which, that's a great answer, right? He's trusting God rather than himself. But here's where Gideon messed up. He said, there is one thing that you can do for me. I want everybody to give me a gold earring, some of the spoils of victory from this battle that he had just won. And he took that gold earring, all of them, and he made it into a golden ephod. Now, an ephod is a weird word. Basically, you just need to know this. It's something that priests would wear. It was an article of clothing. And ironically, priests were supposed to be people that helped the people worship God. But Gideon, by having this golden priestly article of clothing made, what he really did was, the Bible says, had himself, his family, and all of Israel worshiping that instead of God. Now catch this, Gideon just saw God do an incredible victory that only he could do. I mean, a couple hundred people against thousands and thousands would not happen apart from God intervening. He saw that victory. He knew that God was the one who was worthy of his worship, and yet, in a moment of weakness, he created something else to put his attention on. This is so true of us and that seesaw I mentioned earlier, where we recognize God being good and powerful and worthy of our worship, and then we get distracted by other things that are shiny or seemingly newer or closer to us, and we start to worship those things. Now, here's the good news, y'all. God is still faithful, even when we're not faithful to him. So what do we do with this story? How do we apply it to us? Let's look for ways that we can worship God this week, fully worshiping him. Let's put aside whatever is distracting us from that worship and chase after him, because he is the only one and the only thing that's worthy of that worship. So maybe for you, it means setting down your phone and spending some time with a paper Bible that can't distract you with apps or social media. Maybe it's spending some extra time in prayer. Maybe it is singing a song to God, but ask him this question: God, how can I better worship you this week? He is worthy of all of our worship. So whether you feel like you're on a seesaw or not, you have moments that you're liking it, you're hating it, you're up, you're down, remember this: God is constant. He is there. He is worthy of your worship, and he offers you to pour out all of that worship on him with your very lives. So this week, how will you worship him?